behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Hello and welcome back to the GTM podcast. Not sure if I'm allowed to say this anymore, but I'm going to throw it out there. Happy New Year, because I haven't actually personally recorded one of these in a little while. But this is going to be a fun one. Just got back from a great offsite down in Scottsdale with my man, Max Altschuler. Max, welcome. We haven't had you on the pod in a little while.
It's been a minute. Yeah, it was great having the team out here in Scottsdale, Arizona last week. Got a ton done, did some cool team bonding stuff, got everybody up Camelback Mountain, did a little putting, did a little pop stroke, which was a lot of fun. Turns out Sophie is a naturally gifted putter. So see if that translates to the golf game over time. I heard you and her are going to start training hard up in Vancouver. So that's fun. Get into the sim because it's too cold outside. But yeah, it's great week.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And naturally, me and Paul completely tied on the putting course. So there's always no shortage of competition and got the exact same number. But yeah, I got to get in the golf tech sim, going to LA in 2 weeks to go play some golf with Wes and the Flex team. Should be super fun. But man, I wanted to bring you on. Haven't had you on in a little while. You've been working like a madman, and you know we've just had our heads down. It's been a pretty wild year, so I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking back because you and I probably could do better at looking back. I think we're always focused on the future and plans, but a lot happened in 2023. So I wanted to start there. Quick look back on 2023, and then I'm going to try and tease out some predictions for 2024, kind of on the broader tech landscape, as well as kind of go to market and where we might be heading. But man, you look back at 2023, what were some of the highlights for you?
Oh, wow. We did a lot. Obviously moved over from a rolling fund to a standard fund. Traveled around the globe. I think between the team, we've covered quite a bit of ground. China, Singapore, London, Ireland, all around the United States, Canada. I think a couple of us actually went to Mexico on vacation. So we've got a lot of miles. 15 new investments from last year. I think that was out of 700 deals that we saw. So, we do quite a bit of whittling that down. Over 300 GTM leader LPs and ramp members in the network. That's pretty incredible. What else would you add to that?
Hired 2 people, able to, hire Amit Alani, who was interning for us. Now he's a full-time analyst. He's just getting up to speed really, really fast. And then, highlight for me was, bringing on Sophie to run our marketing as our first, VP of marketing to really handle the media entity that we bought this year as well. So we left out that we bought a company. That was a big one. Those couple months were pretty hectic, to say the least, of running the fund and then also rebranding and relaunching to GTMnow. But it's really cool to see that now just picking up steam and growing in all the right directions. And we moved into our first office up here in Vancouver, Canada. I never thought I'd be a proponent of in-person over remote, having worked remote with you and the SalesHacker and outreach team for so long. But fuck, man, it's really energizing. And I love being in here. If someone can beat me into the office, I'm pumped. And seeing people, collaborate and do great work together is pretty cool. And we drag you up here from time to time, even though it's too cold for you.
It's too cold for me. Yeah, hard pass. Why can't you guys have been born in Cabo or something like that? I'd prefer to go down there, but the remote thing is a good segue into our predictions for 2024. So we got a couple here. that we'll dive into. I'd say, 5 at least, maybe a couple bonus ones that we end up teasing out. But yeah, I think remote will be pretty much a thing of the past for most companies, most sizable companies. I think the small companies like ours can still kind of hack it a little bit. And there are certainly exceptions to the rule, but it's I don't think it's working that well. I think people need to be in person. And I think it works for a small subset of folks. I mean, if you look at like the winners from remote work, it's people who have been in the workforce for a while, have already kind of learned by osmosis, learned the ropes in their profession. They're already well connected and well networked and already like well respected by their peers. They've got maybe larger houses in the suburbs and, have like a dedicated workspace or office. And they were, maybe typically commuting before that. So it makes their lives even easier. And you look at the flip side of that, and you've got some of these, let's call it like the SDR role that was probably impacted the most, or like early, like junior marketing roles. I mean, a lot of these people live in the city because that's where like a social life is for people of that age. And they're in a 3-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. And so their bedroom is their office. If they're lucky enough to have a bedroom on their own. They don't get to learn by osmosis. I think one of the best things you can do in a GTM role is being amongst your peers in person, especially in a sales role where you get to turn around and say like, hey, how do you address this budgetary concern? Or like, oh, wow, like I just got to hear you on the phone on that call. That was really great. I'm going to try it too. Like there's just so much of that. And also being seen is so much of kind of the job in a lot of those cases. Like you get a much longer leash if you're the first one in, last one out. It's hard to do that as remote. And then, you really need self-starters, high agency people who are going to be remote employees. And it's a very different type of employee. So I do think we're coming out of this COVID, it's okay to be remote type thing. And you're seeing, a lot of companies address it right now on social media. Some not do it very well. Like that WebMD video was horrendous. And, I'm sure somebody will be let go because of it, because that was ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know if this is going to be here to stay in mass the way we thought it was. And you're already seeing a bunch of companies go out of business, or wind down that were focused on serving the remote demographic. At the same time, one thing that I think won't go away is offshoring. I think we continue to do a lot more offshoring. So engineering and support roles, at least to places like India, Singapore, Mexico, you name it, Sri Lanka, where have you, Colombia. I think there's a lot more offshoring to happen. I think there's really good engineering talent out there. There's really good support folks who speak, English really well in these areas, and it ends up just being a lot cheaper for organizations for certain roles. So we'll see. We'll see where that leads. But those are my thoughts on kind of remote work and offshoring.
I tend to agree for sure. The only like slight tweak I would put there is, from my perspective, I think you mentioned that maybe startups can get away with it. I actually think it's more important for startups to be together in an office. And I think some of these bigger companies that maybe have more systems and process built out and have hyper specialized roles, I think they might be able to get away with it. The Amazons, the Googles of the world, as long as you're not in a cross-functional collaborative role, like maybe a marketer could be. But if you're just like an engineer or some of these things, I think they can get away with it. But I don't know. The more we have people in person, the more I think about the last week we had and in office. Like if I had to pick, there's the old question of if you had to get your competitor to be either remote or in person, what would you rather them be? And when you frame it like that, you're like, I'd want them to be remote. And then what does that tell you?
That was a really good tweet in psychology right there. Framing it that way was, and the overwhelming majority was like, yeah, remote. Okay, cool. So M&A, this is the next one. I think M&A is going to continue to accelerate. It is wild how many companies raised money in 2020, 2021, 2022 that are coming back to market right now and running out of cash and don't have the metrics to raise more money. So I do think that M&A will ramp up. The Figma Adobe deal should have no impact at all. That was a deal that would have created a monopoly, a $20 billion monopoly at a 45x multiple. I think those are few and far between. I still think even like a Slack deal would happen, whereas Adobe and Figma is kind of like a special edge case here. You won't see as many of those types of M&As happening, but I think there are plenty of tuck-ins, plenty of 30, 50, 100, $250 million tuck-ins, things like that. I think we'll be surprised at how many of them don't clear the preference stack and, nobody makes money on them. So it'll be an interesting year for all that, but I think there are a lot of opportunities for some of these companies that are doing well and are a bit bigger, have cash buffers to go out and add on some new SKUs, add on some new tech, add on some new teams. So we'll I think this will be the year. This will be the year it all starts.
And do you think that'll be driven, you mentioned Adobe, like larger tech companies. Do you think it's going to be driven from large tech companies or private equity, most of the M&A activity?
Both. I actually think the larger tech companies may not be the biggest players here. I think it'll be the smaller, like slightly post-IPO or maybe some pre-IPO ones that have, really strong businesses and a bunch of cash in the bank still from the previous round that they raised, and find a way to kind of expand their SKU. Like Miro should be a buyer. I think they did just acquire a company, but like that'd be a perfect company where it's a healthy business. Even Figma, super healthy business. Klaviyo is another example of this. Healthy businesses, profitable businesses. They can get a lot out of a $30 million or $50 million tuck-in. Whereas a company Adobe size, that doesn't do anything for them. They have to go buy Figmas. They have to go buy big companies. Same thing with, Salesforce and some of the other ones. Like I think you'll see more like activity from a ZoomInfo than some of the massive companies. It just makes sense. So yeah, we'll see. And then on the same note there, third prediction, IPO window reopens. The bar has gone way up. It used to be about 200 million ARR. Didn't matter if it was profitable. Rule of 40 was a thing. Now all of a sudden it's 500 million ARR or more. Profitable, 30% plus growth, multiple SKUs, a really professionally set up organization to take them to the next level. And I think a lot of companies are holding out on IPOing for a while just to get kind of the shop in order and make sure they're hitting those numbers. But at a certain point, there's going to be, really no other options. They're going to have to go out. And I think we'll see the Stripes of the world, the Databricks, some of these ones that have been kind of standing at the doorstep for quite a while, finally take that leap. So hopefully by the end of this year, the IPO window opens back up, and that'd be great for the ecosystem. We need liquidity to come back. Venture capital and, all the LPs need to start seeing some money come back. They can't just go all out. So you need to unlock the IPO market for that to happen, and the M&A market. But a lot of those M&A deals are just going to be, I think, cash back if you're lucky. So
who do you think is going to have the first really successful IPO of 2024?
I mean, Stripe or Databricks make the most sense at this point. I think they're the two everybody's waiting on.
I feel like we just need one to go really well, and then it's going to change all the sentiment and get people feeling less nervous about pulling the trigger. So going back to your first prediction, you mentioned it'd be tough to be an SDR, BDR who's working remote. There's been a lot of talk over really the last 2 years. People beat this drum all the time. Outbound is dead. What do you think happens with the SDR function in 2024 and kind of outbound in general?
I mean, people have been saying like cold calling is dead, cold emailing is dead, all that kind of stuff for like a decade now. And I don't know. I mean, it's still clearly working for a lot of companies. So I don't think there's a such thing as like outbound is dead SDRs, or is a thing of the past. Everything's all this AI enabled, all this other whatever. I do think that technology is augmenting the reps more than ever before, especially with AI. I think what you end up getting with that, if you're not careful, is just more of the same. And so you do have to find ways to stick out. I also think that in 2022 and 2023, everyone was rebalancing internally. And so nobody was buying. So it didn't really matter how you were reaching out to people. If nobody's buying anything, you're not going to have a good time, right? So I do think in 2024, some of that comes back. People are like, okay, we've righted the ship, we're out of the swells, and we can get back to thinking about growth and growing the business and doing it responsibly. And they did their cuts and they did whatever else, and they got to a point where it's like, okay, now we're running at break even or cash flow positive. So they can come back to a point where they can start reinvesting in the business, and I think we'll start seeing outbound and the SDR be more productive in 2024 than they were in 2022 and 2023. But AI is a big piece of it. I think it needs to be used the right way. I think it'll be the right way means better targeting. The right way means better messaging, but not just all the same messaging. The right way means smoother and faster in the reps workflow. So I'm excited for the SDR role and for sales in general in 2024. 2022, 2023 were tough. It was the kind of the years of optimization and cost cutting inside of organizations and less about investing in kind of innovation and growth. So hopefully we're coming out of that and enabling a little bit more of a economic spark for some of these companies.
I think SDR teams are definitely going to lean into the new functionality in AI. They're going to learn how to use it right. And then I think another trend is, we're going to see the continued rise of like ecosystem-led growth. So we're going to enable our SDR teams, our BDR teams to help us build networks, help analyze, understand those networks, provide value to those networks, and then find ways to solve problems that turn into revenue. And I think finally we have tools like Cabal and Crossbeam that can enable kind of this partner-led, ecosystem-led growth, which I think will be a big part of 2024. You open the AI wormhole, so we'll quickly, we have to touch on that. Who do you think the biggest winners of the AI revolution are in 2024?
I don't know who the biggest winners are going to be. I think like the good money, at least from a venture bet, is in AI infrastructure and vertical AI. There are plenty of use cases for AI in all these kind of edge niche industries that haven't had any innovation in a very long time. And so we're going to see that. And, that's certainly an area that we personally look to invest. Also AI infrastructure, one of our biggest investments is a company called Writer. So, we feel really good there, but I'm not one of those GPT wrapper haters, at least not in a blanket approach. I think there are plenty of really smart founders that can use that as a wedge to a larger platform and, build a solid workflow that allows people to get a ton of value out of, leveraging the wrapper and then turning that into something much bigger. Where I get stuck on the whole kind of wrapper thing, and I think a lot of people do, is when it's something that can be easily cannibalized by GPT just deciding, okay, we're going to turn on this like little tiny feature, and then your company goes away. And also by the founder not really understanding how this wrapper or this first product is a wedge to a larger platform. And it's pretty clear in usually the early conversations that you have where it's like, oh yeah, this is it. I don't know where it goes from here, versus this is it, but here's the bigger, the bigger concept that we're going after. And so it's really important to kind of pay attention to that. But I do think AI will continue to amaze and excite. I don't think the luster is really going away. I think just more and more is coming out faster and faster. And so that's really cool. We're in companies like Simplified and Tavis and a few others that leverage it for GTM. So yeah, it's an exciting space. It'll continue to get more exciting.
It's going to be fun to watch it play out. And I'll just, reiterate kind of what you said with a slightly different spin. I think like broad strokes, there's going to be these horizontal platforms that benefit from a lot of proprietary actions being taken in their system that it further accelerates the quality of their LLM. So you'll have these like horizontal or general applicable LLMs, and then you'll have these hyper niche verticals that are training a model in usually an unsexy, forgotten about industry on something very specific that you have to have a learned experience from. You have to have spent 15, 20 years in agriculture or, insurance to figure out how to train these platforms correctly. But it's going to be exciting times, lots of things in the works.
Well, I think to tie a bow on it all, last and final prediction is a flight to quality continues. So what do I mean by that? Well, in the past, in the venture capital funding game, you've had, the fifth best company in the like nice to have category raise a seed, an A, a B, and a C. And when you've got, Tiger and Insight and all these other funds that are $20 and $12 billion funds, there's enough money to go around to do that. But when those funds are $2 billion funds and $3 billion funds, and things get tighter, you're going to see very few companies in nice to have categories get funded, even through their, Series A and B and anywhere near that. And even in need to have categories, instead of, 10 companies being funded in it, you might only get, the top 3 funded. So I think we're going to continue to see a flight to quality for a very long time here. I think we're restarting the cycle in especially in this area. And, we'll see as these funds get bigger, maybe all that comes back and we forget all the things that we learned from the last few years. But, for us, we're always looking to invest in the very best companies. And it's sure there's some price sensitivity and sure there's an ownership target, but ultimately I'd rather have as much as I can in the very best company in the space than a lot more ownership in some kind of like, fifth best player in a nice to have space. And I think we're out of the 2021 kind of phase and back into the flight to quality phase again.
Yeah. I think it's a healthy trend, and hopefully we don't forget all the hard fought lessons that we learned over the last few years. Hopefully they're here to stay. Well, awesome, man. I know we have 5 minutes to a fairly important LP meeting, so I think I'll wrap it up here.
Right off the cuff, what do you got? Any crazy prediction? Any what do you got on crypto? Anything? What's
Yeah, I mean,
what's on Scott's
crypto's
mind?
going to go crazy again in 2024.
You think so?
I don't know if it's on my mind, but I think it will go crazy for a shorter period of time. I think everyone's going to think it's another big bull run. And it's kind of going to be a bit of a rug
the
pull.
ETFs got accepted.
We'll
hasn't done anything. Okay, This is not investment advice. We have to make the disclaimer, but okay. So
definitely not. Definitely not.
My crazy one would be like,
I think it'll go crazy in about 2 months.
Okay. All right. He's pegging April, I think, was his comment to me on the hike. So we'll see. Okay. Not investment advice again. I think somebody other than Trump or Biden will be president. That'd be my crazy out there one. Right now, it doesn't seem likely, but I don't know, man. It's just, maybe it's wishful thinking.
We don't get political on here, but as a Canadian, as a third party observer, I think that would be a healthy thing to happen. That's all I'll say.
I don't. Yeah. Not political is a good way to do a podcast, but I do think one of them will not be in office. So we'll see.
Should we just do a hyper political episode one time? Just
ranting and
just get into it. We had some interesting conversations at the offsite. Geopolitical.
Those are more about like future of the world is Elysium. Go see that movie if you haven't already. I actually think you learn a ton about where the world can go from reading some of these fiction books and watching some of these fiction movies like Ready Player One, Elysium, Ayn Rand, all that type of stuff. So anyway, good pod. Let's kick off a good year.
Good chat. Here's to a big 2024. Excited, man. Let's keep it rocking. Thanks you all for listening. And of course, if you haven't signed up for the GTM newsletter, go check it out. We're going super deep on different go-to-market topics every week from some of the best in the biz. So go check it out. And we'll see you next week.